나는 tarwa tobi lam ane ganesh komgore se de lam go songje ane di.
Good morning. So last night we started to look at the outline, looking at the path that one needs to cultivate within, the mental path to cultivate within, in order to attain liberation. So we looked last night at what is meant by this term liberation. So liberation is attaining the state where one is liberated from the suffering realms of samsara. It is the state where one has completely abandoned the afflictions together with their seeds. And we looked at, in brief, or mentioned, the method by which one attains liberation. So there one cultivates various causes. The first has two subcomponents. By meditating deeply on the faults of samsara and the causes or what creates or what origin samsara comes about from, dependence on those two causes, one gives rise to definite emergence, developing a deep habituation to this mind, this mental path, until it becomes uncontrived. That's the first cause. Thereafter, one engages in the 6 practices that will bring about the fulfillment of the aspiration of definite emergence, the attainment of liberation. And those 6 causes are generosity, ethics, patience, enthusiastic perseverance, concentration, and wisdom. Those 6 practices, plus the initial cause of definite emergence, make the 7 causes for the attainment of liberation. And those 6 practices can be condensed into 3, the 3 higher trainings of ethics, concentration, and wisdom. So give rise to definite emergence, this determined attitude to gain liberation from the suffering realms of samsara. One needs to recognize that samsara has no abiding value. There's nothing worthy of hoping for, of striving for, that remains bound in samsara. And to develop that understanding requires reflecting on true sufferings and true origins. So the term liberation, or last night there was the term nirvana. So these 2 words, liberation and nirvana, can refer to the same thing or different things. So liberation and nirvana one can generally use interchangeably, but they can refer to different end states. So there are 3 types of practitioners. There are those of the Theravada persuasion, of which there are 2 types, hearers and solitary realizers. When they achieve their individual liberation, they become arhats, and they attain the state of liberation or nirvana, and that is attained through the abandoning of the afflictions together with their seeds. So that's 2 types of liberation, or 2 types of nirvana. There is a 3rd type of liberation, which often just the word liberation is used, but its fuller name would be the Great Liberation, and that is a synonym for Buddhahood. And there's also a type of nirvana, which is also a synonym for Buddhahood. So this is something that only bodhisattvas achieve, and it is achieved through the abandonment of the afflictions together with their seeds and the stains of the afflictions. So therefore, the term liberation or nirvana can refer to the individual liberation or nirvana of an arhat, or it can refer to the great liberation or nirvana of a Buddha. When one is just talking, one uses the word liberation in a loose sense, and it's not particularly clear as to which liberation is being referred. If one is talking very precisely, then the term liberation would refer to the state of individual liberation achieved by hearers and solitary realizers, which is a state of cessation achieved by the abandonment of the afflictions together with their seeds. This can also be called a state of peace. And again, if one is talking precisely, then one wouldn't say for Buddhahood, liberation, but great liberation. But again, when one is just generally talking, one uses the term liberation, and it can refer to any other states. So let's talk a little more deeply, or in a little more detail, about the state of individual liberation, which can also be called the state of an arhat, and particularly because it's an individual liberation, it's referring to the state of an arhat achieved by those of hero and solitary realizer lineages, so the Tibetan practitioners. So now, just talking about their individual liberation, when they achieve their state of liberation, they have achieved the true cessation, which is the abandonment of the afflictions together with their seeds, and they have achieved liberation. And this is, of course, referring to their mind. The mind is liberated from cyclic existence. But in this life, this final life as a non-arhat, they were born under the power of contaminated karma and afflictions, which means their body is a true suffering. And in this life, then, when they grew up and later attained liberation, they still have a body that is a true suffering. Their body will continue to age and experience illness and die. Die under the power and die. So this is a being who has attained liberation, but their body is still a true suffering. So this state of liberation, which is also can be called nirvana, is a specific type of nirvana. It is called nirvana with remainder. So again, in the previous segment, we're saying that this term liberation, there are different types. The word can be used loosely, and there's the type of great liberation which refers to Buddhahood. And I also mentioned that nirvana, also there are different types, but the word nirvana has a general usage, but there are, when one's talking precisely, different types. So here is a further type, nirvana with remainder. It is achieved solely by hero and solitary realizer arhats when they achieve their individual liberation. And what is this remainder referring to? What remains is this true suffering, which is their contaminated body. So this is the nirvana with remainder, and it's the nirvana that is achieved by the hero and solitary realizer arhat in that very life that they achieve nirvana. When that arhat, so the practitioner of hero and solitary realizer lineage, in the life that they attain arhatship or attain liberation, attain nirvana, the state of nirvana is nirvana with remainder. When they die, they are reborn in a pure land. They, of course, have still attained nirvana, still attained liberation, but now it's no longer their nirvana is no longer called nirvana with remainder, because they are born in a pure land with a body that is no longer a true suffering. So now it's called nirvana without remainder. So we've had two types of nirvana: nirvana with remainder, nirvana without remainder. The without remainder is attained when the hero or solitary realizer arhat dies and is reborn in their pure land, no longer with a body that is a true suffering. Therefore, it's a nirvana without remainder. So just to repeat this, and as a translator, I'll include the Sanskrit now, because our book will later use it, our text will later use the Sanskrit. So these two types of nirvana, nirvana with and then nirvana without remainder, are only achieved by the Tibetan practitioners, heroes and solitary realizers, or the Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas. So those types of practitioners who are striving for their own individual liberation, when they achieve it, in the life they achieve it, they still have a body which is a true suffering, and that is the remainder in the term nirvana with remainder. When they die and are reborn in a pure land, they are reborn without a body that is, or their body is no longer a true suffering. Therefore, they have attained nirvana, or therefore their nirvana now is called nirvana without remainder. So the difference is where not in terms of the cessation, which is the abandonment of the afflictions together with the seeds, but in whether they have a body that is a true suffering or not. These two types of nirvana, nirvana with remainder and nirvana without remainder, are only achieved by heroes and solitary realizers, practitioners of that lineage, the Shavakas and Pratyeka Buddhas. It is not achieved by Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So now let's return to the text and reading from where we concluded last night. So in the middle of page 181, and just a few changes in terms of terminology. If this were solely a commentary on the path of persons of intermediate capacity, an extensive commentary on the three trainings would be necessary here. However, since this is not the case, the training in wisdom, special insight or meditative insight, and the training of the mind for generating shamatha or calm abiding will be explained in the context of persons of great capacity. Therefore, here I will only briefly state the way to train in ethics. Look at the first sentence. If this were solely a commentary on the path of persons of intermediate capacity, an extensive commentary on the three trainings would be necessary here. So if this, to rephrase this or give the meaning of this first part, if this were solely a commentary on the paths of a person of intermediate capacity, in other words, if Lama Tsongkhapa had written a text on how a practitioner should train in order to achieve the goal of practitioners of intermediate capacity, in other words, individual liberation, then he would be, from this point, writing differently from how he is about to write. So that would be because a person of hero solitary realizer lineage who is striving for their own individual liberation will do so by means of either the six practices, generosity, and so forth, or them condensed into the three trainings we had mentioned in the verse above. Wisdom, ethics, wisdom, and concentration. But here, Lama Tsongkhapa is not solely writing a commentary solely for practitioners of intermediate capacity. Sorry. But rather, so therefore, because it's this part is for the trainings that are shared, later we know the six practices of generosity and so forth will be presented in detail. So in particular, those are concentration and wisdom. So here, he's not going to be writing with the goal of individual liberation in mind. Staying with this first sentence, if Lama Tsongkhapa is saying, if I were writing a commentary that was solely for persons of intermediate capacity, as opposed to what he is writing, which is a commentary this part is a commentary that is shared with practitioners of intermediate capacity, because he's writing a text for those who are striving not for the goal of heroes and solitary realizers, but for striving for the goal of bodhisattvas, Buddhahood. But if he were writing a text solely for practitioners of intermediate capacity, he would need to, at this point, write on how to train in the six practices of generosity, ethics, and so forth. But as that's not the text he's writing, later those practices will be covered. But here, he is then, of those six practices, just going to focus on one, and that is ethics. But, so again, I also said, this doesn't mean that a practitioner, by training solely in ethics, will achieve the goal of individual liberation. This is not the case. The other five practices are required. There's this part here, however, since this is not the case, hopefully makes clear that Lama Tsongkhapa's objective or goal is not to explain how to achieve individual liberation, but rather to achieve Buddhahood. Hence, and then he'll continue, the actual purpose of this text is to guide the student to develop all the preliminaries so that then later they are qualified, they have the necessary inner qualities developed to train in the paths of bodhisattvas, in the actual paths of bodhisattvas, and that will come next. Because this is a text of the Mahayana Dharma, when one comes to the trainings of a practitioner of the Mahayana, those same 6 practices need to be cultivated. So rather than explaining how to train in them here and then again in a few pages' time, Lama Tsongkhapa will explain the 6 practices in great detail later in the context of the trainings of a bodhisattva. So there, all 6 practices from generosity to wisdom will be explained in detail. However, here, one of the trainings, though, will be presented, that of ethics. So here, ethics will be presented, and it will be presented in a brief manner. This text from Lama Tsongkhapa is not a text presenting the trainings of a practitioner of initial capacity, although those trainings have been presented earlier. It's also not a text presenting the trainings of a practitioner of intermediate capacity, even though those trainings are what we've just looked at. It's also not a text that is presenting the trainings of a practitioner of greatest capacity, even though those are soon to be presented. Rather, because this is a text in the Lamrim genre, it is, so this term Lamrim is translated as in its like a full meaning, the graduated stages of training the mind in the path to enlightenment. So it's the graduated stages, the sequential stages, of which one trains one's mind to cultivate the mental paths that lead to the attainment of enlightenment or Buddhahood. So therefore, whilst what one has in the Lamrim genre of text is not the trainings of a practitioner of initial capacity, but the trainings that are shared with a practitioner of initial capacity. Likewise, it's not presented the trainings of a practitioner of intermediate capacity, but rather the trainings that are shared with a practitioner of intermediate capacity. And these then are the foundational practices which are required to engage in the final section, the trainings trainings that are unique to practitioners of greatest capacity. A text that presents the trainings of a practitioner of intermediate capacity would differ from a text such as this, because a practitioner of intermediate capacity has a specific goal in mind, that of attaining their own individual liberation, and because their goal or their objective differs, so too will their motivation. So this is how a Lamrim text will differ from, for example, a text that presents the trainings for practitioners of intermediate capacity. Because a Lamrim text has as its final attainment, or its goal, the attainment of Buddhahood. Whereas a practitioner of intermediate capacity is not striving to become a Buddha, but to gain their own individual liberation. Therefore, their objective, their goal differs, and their motivation. So why then, in a text that is focused on how to attain Buddhahood, are the trainings that are shared with practitioners of initial capacity and the trainings shared with the practitioner of intermediate capacity included? They are included because to become a Buddha, one has to generate bodhicitta. To generate bodhicitta, one needs to develop the foundation of definite emergence. Therefore, the trainings which are shared with practitioners of initial and intermediate capacity are included in a text that has as its specific objective the attainment of Buddhahood, because those striving for Buddhahood need to engage in shared trainings with practitioners of initial and intermediate capacity. Now, continuing in the text, the Lama Tsongkhapa, now as we've just seen, the final sentence there, therefore here I will only briefly state the way to train in ethics. Now we come to an extensive presentation on how to train in ethics. So now reading from the text, in this regard, first then Lama Tsongkhapa will present the benefits of training one's mind in ethics, or ethical restraint. In this regard, initially contemplate the benefits of ethics again and again, and increase your heartfelt enthusiasm for it. Letter to your friend says, and just the first line's changed a bit. It is taught that ethical restraint is the basis, the ground of all excellent qualities, just like the earth is the basis for the animate and the inanimate. And then from questions of Subhuhu Tantra, just as crops grow faultlessly depending on the soil, the most superior virtuous qualities grow, depending on someone's ethics, moistened by the water of compassion. Lama Tsongkhapa writes, in this regard, initially contemplate the benefits of ethics again and again, and increase your heartfelt enthusiasm for it. So, with a new meditation topic, Lama Tsongkhapa always presents first the benefits. And the reason why he's done this repeatedly throughout the text is if one understands the benefits of achieving something, and not just understands intellectually, but so that one understands at a deep level, then a yearning will arise to achieve those benefits. The mind will be focused on achieving those benefits. So, for example, if someone is contemplating going into business, if they think, maybe it will be successful, and they're not going to be particularly focused on their business endeavor, they're not going to put too much energy and time into it. Whereas if they have researched well and come to a clear understanding, this will be successful, I will do really well, they will put all their energy into their business. So similarly, the meditation topics always start with the benefits, and these need to be contemplated repeatedly, as Lama Tsongkhapa writes, again and again. And why? So as to increase your heartfelt enthusiasm for it. This, by taking the benefits of ethics to heart, a strength of mind will arise. And the strength of mind will help ensure that one stays within the bounds or the boundaries of what is ethical. Now we come to a quotation from Nagarjuna's letter to a friend. It is taught that ethical restraint is the basis, the ground of all excellent qualities, just like the earth is the basis for the animate and the inanimate. So the English and the Tibetan, the sequence is a little mixed, so I have to bounce around a little bit. So it starts with, it is taught that ethical restraint. So ethical restraint then is the focus here, and it is presented as, now we go to the next line, ethical restraint is just like the earth is the basis for the animate and inanimate. So ethical restraint is the very foundation in which all good qualities grow. So this is a common analogy of likening ethics to the earth, in that, now above, there's the ground of all excellent qualities that can grow. So reading the whole quote. It is taught that ethical restraint is the basis, the ground of all excellent qualities, just like the earth is the basis for the animate and inanimate. So if a gardener or a farmer has excellent soil, then the time and effort and energy they put into sowing their fields and caring for it, they will get an excellent crop. And from that excellent crop, they will benefit. The insects and bird life and other animals will benefit. So tremendous benefit comes from having excellent soil. But if the soil is rubbish, and the farmer or the gardener puts a lot of effort, the same amount of effort into their gardening or into their farming, but the soil is rubbish, then they are not going to achieve much at all. Their labor will not produce much effect. And therefore, humans will not benefit, animals will not benefit either. So this, in that context, is very clear. The quality of the soil makes a great difference to the crop or the result that follows. So this is why this very widely, this analogy for the importance of ethical restraint is so widely used. Because if one's mind is restrained within the confines of what is ethical, the benefits are immense. The benefits can be expressed in differing ways. There are the physical benefits for the person, in that they will experience physical happiness in this and lives to come, in other words, excellent rebirths, and mental happiness from having a mind that is restrained from coming under the influence of afflictions. Moreover, because of the quality of soil cultivated within their mind, this basis of ethical restraint, the other qualities of the Dharma, the other excellent qualities of the Dharma will be easily accomplished. Qualities such as love and compassion, concentration and wisdom. So all of these, whatever excellent qualities one is looking for in the Dharma, whether it's to realize emptiness, to develop single-pointed concentration, to develop the love and compassion of a bodhisattva, all of these come about in dependence on the prior and stable cultivation of ethical restraint. So this is one way that one can look at the benefits of ethical restraint, physical happiness, mental happiness. Another way to express that is in terms of temporary happiness. So the happiness and benefits that are experienced whilst one is still an ordinary being, and eventually also the long-term happiness that is, or the everlasting happiness that is achieved with liberation or enlightenment. So on the basis, the foundation of ethical restraint, all the happiness of non-arhats is achieved, and non-Buddhas is achieved. And then the happiness of liberation and enlightenment is also achieved in dependence on that same basis. So that's a second way to express the benefits. The first was physical and mental happiness, the second is temporary and long-term or ultimate, and the third is in relation to oneself and others. So it's clear that happiness comes for oneself through these other two presentations, physical and mental happiness, temporary and ultimate happiness. So that refers to happiness for oneself. But also happiness for others comes about in dependence on oneself developing ethics. Having a mind that is ethically restrained, then through our interactions with others, we benefit them directly and indirectly. So these then are three sets of benefits, or three ways to reflect on the benefits of ethical restraint. Reflecting on them repeatedly over a sustained period leads to a deep conviction arising. I have to live in accordance with what is ethical, the strong, determined attitude. So then Lama Tsongkhapa quotes from questions of Subahu Tantra. Just as crops grow faultlessly depending on the soil, the most superior virtuous qualities grow, depending on someone's ethics, moistened by the water of compassion. So the first line is the same meaning as we've just looked at before, just as crops grow faultlessly depending on the soil. So as I mentioned earlier, this is a very commonly used analogy to explain the importance of developing a foundation of ethical restraint, because this is the foundation upon which all excellent qualities can be built, or it is the soil in which all excellent qualities will grow. And just like we've seen in the presentations on cause and effect, in dependence on the quality of the causes, the quality of the result will be proportionate. If the cause is of excellent quality, of superior quality, so too will the result. Whereas if the cause is of middling or lesser quality, so too will be the result. So this is the meaning then of the first line, just as crops grow faultlessly depending on the soil, then the most superior virtuous qualities grow. So just to say as a translator, this word phenomena is the same word for Dharma. In this context though, because it can be translated in many ways, qualities is better. So let's look at these three terms, most superior, virtuous, and qualities. So qualities refers to here all excellent qualities of any type. Here we're specifically referring to those which are virtuous qualities. So virtue comes about independent on the foundation of ethics. If that foundation is flawed, if one is unethical, one is not going to be accumulating virtue. So therefore, depending on the foundation of ethics, one can accumulate virtuous qualities. And not only virtuous qualities, one can develop the superior, near superior to be better as supreme virtuous qualities, which refers to the attainment of Buddhahood. So, therefore, we can see that independence on the foundation of ethics, all virtuous qualities can be achieved. Those that lead to excellent rebirths, those that lead to liberation, the liberation of a hero or solitary realizer, and those that lead, those virtuous qualities, those supreme or superior virtuous qualities that lead to Buddhahood. All, the third line, depend on someone's ethics. And to then bring about the attainment of the superior virtuous qualities, namely Buddhahood. So this word here, superior or supreme, in this context refers to Buddhahood. So to bring about the attainment of Buddhahood depends on someone's ethics. And then the fourth line, moistened by the water of compassion. So moistened by the water, again, is within the analogy of crops growing faultlessly depending on the soil. But it shows that the compassion, the great compassion of the Bodhisattva, when conjoined with ethics, then all the virtuous qualities can develop to the extent that they become the superior or supreme qualities of Buddhahood. So this then, over the page, needs to be contemplated repeatedly over a sustained period. Contemplate this according to these statements. So we've started now to look at a presentation on ethics. So here, in these two verses, Lama Tsongkhapa has presented in a brief manner the benefits of ethics. So these we need to reflect on repeatedly over sustained periods to bring up a strength of mind, a heartfelt enthusiasm for it. As always, the meditation topic is first presented through the context of the benefits and of training in that topic. And then, secondly, is always presented the fault of not training in that topic. So now Lama Tsongkhapa presents the fault of not training in ethics. So at the top of page 182. Just as guarding the ethics you have undertaken brings enormous benefits, likewise there are great faults to not guarding them. Reading the sentence again. Just as guarding the ethics you have undertaken brings enormous benefits, likewise there are great faults to not guarding them. So this word in the first line, undertaken. So this it may be more clearly expressed as ethics you have accepted or promised. In other words, it shows that there is a willingly accepted to engage within what is ethical, within the bounds of what is ethical. So this term undertaken, it's better expressed as promised or accepted, because the vows that one has received was something that one, with one's own wish, received them. One sought them out and received them, whether they are the vows of the non-ordained or the vows of the ordained. These were sought out and accepted or promised to live within their confines. Doing so brings enormous benefit, but not keeping them well, not guarding them, leads to grave faults. And so too with the other types of vows, the vows that one receives in initiation, the vows of a bodhisattva and the vows of secret mantra, great benefits in keeping them well, and great faults in not doing so. And then there's the final set or final form of vows, which are the one-day vows that one takes in situations such as doing nyungnes. So with all types of ethics that one has accepted or promised to live within, there are great benefits from doing so and grave faults from not keeping the ethics or the vows that one has undertaken. Continuing, so that in the English, this next sentence, starting, you should contemplate, this actually comes much later, so after all the quotations. So we'll skip that now. And Lama Tsongkhapa then makes several quotations, the first being from the Sutra on Cherishing Monks. Ethics are happiness for certain people. Ethics are suffering for others. They are happiness for those who have them. They are suffering for those who breach them. And then Lama Tsongkhapa quotes from the root Tantra of Manjushri. If ethics decline in those who recite, there will be no highest attainments, nor will there be middling attainments. Even the least ones will remain absent. The king of sages did not teach mantra attainments for those of loose ethics, nor is that the place or direction to go to the city of nirvana. How could there be in such bad children any attainments of mantra at all? How could there be fortunate rebirths for those beings who disregard ethics? Since they do not take high rebirths nor partake of highest bliss, what need mention their accomplishments, the mantras of the mantras that the victor taught? So looking at the first quotation, which is from the Sutra on Cherishing Monks, and the first two lines, ethics are happiness for certain people, ethics are suffering for others. So here, one is referring specifically to those who have willingly accepted vows. Those who have willingly accepted vows, or to express it differently, undertaken vows or promised to live in accordance with the vows they have undertaken, they have the very foundation for happiness. That is the meaning of the first line. Ethics are happiness for certain people. So, these two lines are only referring to those who are living who have made the certain vows, who are living within the constraints of what is ethical. For those who are doing so, it is the foundation for happiness. But for others who have also willingly accepted vows, who have willingly promised to live in accordance with vows, if they are not keeping their vows, then suffering will follow. So what we see in these two lines is that vows can be ethical vows or vows can be the cause for either happiness or for suffering. What it depends upon is whether the people who willingly accept these vows, take on these vows, if they keep them, live in accordance with them, or if they break them and do not live in accordance with them. So in this way, we see that vows are the cause for happiness, but if not kept, then they become the cause for suffering. The third and fourth line, they are happiness for those who have them, they are suffering for those who breach them. So that living within the constraints of what is ethical leads to the attainment of happiness, both in this life and lives to come. So as we saw earlier when reflecting on the benefits, living an ethical life is the cause for happiness in this and lives to come. It's a cause of happiness for oneself and for others, and it's a cause for temporary happiness and the ultimate happiness of liberation and enlightenment. This is the great benefit of living within the confines of what is ethical. But, the fourth line, they are suffering for those who breach them. So breach or break them refers to where one has made a vow or a promise or accepted not to do something, but does so. So, for example, having made the promise not to kill, then if one kills, that killing, breaking that vow, becomes the source of suffering. Likewise, if one promises to not lie, but then tells lies, then that becomes a source of suffering. Why? Because one has breached or broken the vows one has taken. So now looking at the quotations from the Root Tantra of Manjushri. So the first two lines of the first verse. If ethics decline in those who recite, there will be no highest attainments. So if ethics decline or decline in those who recite. Recite here means reciting mantras. So if one is engaging in tantric practice, one's going to recite a lot of mantras. And no matter how many mantras one recites, or to express it differently, no matter how much tantric practice one engages in, the second line, there will be no highest attainment. In other words, the potential result of what one is striving for cannot be achieved if one's ethics decline. So this term translated as attainments is perhaps better known as in the Sanskrit siddhis. So siddhis, there are different levels. There are the highest, there are middling, and there are the least or small. So they are siddhis or attainments of varying, quality. The highest, the middling, and the slight. Not even the slight will be achieved if one's ethics decline. So the text specifically says, well, there will be no highest attainments, but really the attainments of any siddhis is prevented if one's ethics decline. And just to, as a translator, to correct myself, so there will be no highest attainments, and then again I taught the whole verse, I made a mistake, nor will there be middling attainments, even the least ones will remain absent. So that's the meaning of what I said, but I was only saying it's in relation to the second line, but it's in relation to all or the whole verse. So if one's ethics, the meaning is as it's written, if one's ethics declines, one's mantra practice will not bring about the desired result. Certainly not the greatest results, not the middling results, nor even the least siddhis will be attained. The second verse, which for us goes, second verse for us is over 2 lines. The king of sages did not teach mantra attainments for those of loose ethics. So the king of sages refers to the Buddha. So the Buddha did not teach mantra attainments for those of loose ethics. In other words, that mantra was taught, or the attainment of siddhis by means of tantric practice was taught for those who are living within the confines of ethical restraint. This verse concludes. Maybe I'll read the whole thing. The king of sages did not teach mantra attainments for those of loose ethics, nor is that the place or direction to go to the city of nirvana. So as we saw on the previous page the qualities or the benefits of ethical restraint, it is the foundation, the soil in which all in which all excellent qualities grow. And this certainly is the case in Tantra or in mantra as well. So the foundation of one's tantric practice is ethical restraint, in the same way that the foundation of all practice, all Buddhist practice, is ethical restraint. And here, the reasons are presented in the 3rd and 4th line. Nor is that the place or direction to go to the city of nirvana. So the city of nirvana is a poetic term that in Tantra is often called to the state of Vajradhara. It's another way to say Buddhahood. So Buddhahood, the state of Vajradhara, the city of nirvana, this is the goal of one's tantric practice. One will not achieve such a great goal, or the highest attainment, as we saw in the previous verse. One will not achieve the highest attainment or the highest siddhi if one's ethics have declined or are loose. One will not go in such a direction nor arrive at that place, the place being the city of nirvana or the state of Vajradhara. And this is because to arrive at the state of Vajradhara, so it's maybe a term used in Tantra to refer to Buddhahood, one does so by means of the tantric trainings of the generation stage, and based on that, the completion stage. And the completion stage achieves its goal, one achieves the city of nirvana, the state of Vajradhara. But to be able to engage in completion stage practice, which comes about independent on the prior training of generation stage practice, one needs to keep excellent ethics throughout. Moreover, to be able to engage in genuine generation stage practice requires the prior trainings of love, compassion, and wisdom, and so forth. So those foundational trainings, so love and compassion coming about in dependence on definite emergence, as does wisdom, all of these require the foundational training of ethical restraint. So when it's said above, in the verse above, the various attainments of the differing levels all come about in dependence on ethical restraint, we see the same mentioned here. One will not progress towards or in the direction, and let alone attain the place of the city of nirvana, the state of Vajradhara, without a foundation of ethical restraint. And the third verse of the Root Chantra of Manjushri. How could there be in such bad children any attainments of mantra at all? So just looking at these first two lines. So this term bad children. So the children we've had previously, it's often translated as childish, and it refers to afflicted beings. So if they are childish in that they are not only influenced by their afflictions, but they follow their afflictions. So this is the term childish, or here children, and then bad. So this can be taken quite broadly or translated quite broadly, but it's a negative word. So bad children is fine. What it refers to is those who are under the control of their afflictions. That when the afflictions not only easily arise, but they arise and they influence the behavior of the person. So this is what is meant by this term, a bad child or bad children. Someone who's under the control of their afflictions. Such a person does not have a mind that is restrained within the bounds of what is ethical. When one is restrained within the bounds of what is ethical, one is not acting under the influence of the afflictions. They may arise, but they are not dominating, they're not controlling one. They may arise, but one is not necessarily following them. So a bad child is someone who is just following their afflictions, under the control of their afflictions. So in such a person, how could there be in such bad children any attainments of mantra at all? So these attainments we saw in the verse above, highest, middling, and least, none of them will come about in dependence on someone whose mind is still deeply afflicted, who has not yet managed to restrain their mind within the confines of what is ethical. So the meaning, or perhaps a clearer way to express the meaning of bad children, is those who are not ethical, those whose minds are not restrained within the confines of what is ethical. That is the meaning then of bad children. The verse continues, how could there be fortunate rebirths for those beings who disregard ethics? So this is, the first two lines are saying, so for those whose mind, bad children, it's not restrained within the confines of what is ethical, they are not going to achieve any mantra attainments at all. And not only that, how could they attain excellent rebirths, fortunate rebirths, if they are disregarding ethics? Into the next verse, the first line, since they do not take high rebirths. So what this is referring to is that these bad children, so those whose minds are not restrained by what is ethical, or to express it in the normal way, are not practicing ethical restraint, because their minds are not ethical, they are not accumulating the cause that leads to an excellent rebirth, ethical restraint. So if someone is not accumulating the cause for an excellent rebirth, they will not achieve an excellent rebirth. And that is the meaning of or excellent rebirth or high rebirth or fortunate rebirth. If they're not accumulating the causes for a fortunate rebirth or a high rebirth, they will not achieve it. What is that cause? Ethical restraint. So let alone talking about mantra attainments, they're not even going to achieve a good rebirth if their mind is not restrained within the confines of what is ethical. So, and then the next line in the next verse, the final verse here, nor partake of highest bliss. So what is being presented is if someone is not keeping the vows properly, they're not living within the confines of what is ethical, they will not be accumulating the causes to achieve an excellent rebirth. So how can they fantasize about achieving spiritual attainments or siddhis, or what we see here, in the final verse, nor partake of highest bliss. This would just be a fantasy. This final verse, I'll just read it all. Since they do not take high rebirths, nor partake of highest bliss, what need mention they're accomplishing the mantras that the victor taught. So the mantras refers to tantric practice. So what we have presented here is if someone is not living in accordance with the vows they have taken, that they have willingly accepted, that they've promised to undertake, or what we saw at the top of the page, this word undertaken, the vows they have undertaken, if they are not living within the confines of such ethics, they are not accumulating the causes for excellent rebirths. So how can they fantasize about achieving yogic attainments, achieving siddhis? This is laughable. So these are in 4 verses quoted from the Root Tantra Manjushri and 1 from the Sutra on Cherishing Monks. Then Lama Tsongkhapa concludes with, now for us in English, it's again at the top, in that paragraph at the top of page 182, you should contemplate the faults of not guarding them again and again, as taught in the scriptures. Now, Lama Tsongkhapa has just presented the faults of not living in accordance with the ethical vows that one has accepted or undertaken. And prior to this, he presented the benefits of living within the confines of what is ethical. So what one needs to reflect on is these 2 sets repeatedly over a sustained period to bring about this determined attitude to always remain within the confines of what is ethical. So the faults and the benefits are opposite to each other. So if one knows the faults, if one knows the benefits of living an ethical life, the faults are the opposite to that. So the benefits of living an ethical life, and we mentioned this earlier, so we look at it in 3 ways. One is accumulating the causes that leads to this life, to physical and mental happiness being experienced in this life, as well as lives to come. It leads to the attainment of one's spiritual progression, spiritual development, and it leads to benefit for oneself and others. And so these are 3 sets that one can reflect on the benefits. And in terms of, for ourselves as spiritual practitioners, as those who aspire to develop qualities of the Dharma within, you can also be very aware that if I keep my mind restrained within the confines of what is ethical, all the good qualities I hope for, I'll be able to develop. If one wants to develop calm abiding, it will come about if one is ethical. So too, qualities such as love, compassion, and wisdom. And with such a foundation, one will be able to engage in tantric practice, generation stage and later completion stage, all as long as one develops the foundation of ethical restraint. So this is a very clear way for us as aspirants to cultivate the paths of the bodhisattva within. Then in terms of the faults, it's the opposite of that. One will not achieve physical or mental happiness if one is unethical, because one will experience far more problems and difficulties in this life, as well as through the causes one is accumulating in lives to come. One's spiritual development will not come about. One will not spiritually progress if one is ethical. All the efforts one puts into developing various qualities, learning and trying to cultivate them within, if one is unethical, still dominated by the afflictions, one is not going to achieve those great qualities. So thereby, one harms not only oneself, by oneself being harmed by the karma one is accumulating, but the impact one has on others is harmful as well if one is unethical. So then, in brief, these are the points of ethical restraint, the benefits and the faults. By reflecting on them repeatedly over a sustained period, one will give rise to that strength of mind, a deep enthusiasm to live an ethical life, to keep one's mind and one's physical and verbal behavior in accordance with the promises that one has made. So then we can conclude there for this morning. If you have questions, then please feel free to ask.